microphone.
Welcome to Two Parents and a Microphone.
That's right. We are two parents, and we have a microphone.
And that is our qualification.
That's it. That's also the name of our podcast.
Exactly. So I'm Shante.
And I'm Chris.
And we're going to be your host for Two Parents and a Microphone. It's just an idea that we got started with. This being our first podcast, I guess we're going to let you into like what
Probably
we're doing
a good idea.
while we're here. Just like throughout life, we have talked a lot.
Had a lot of conversations.
And we're like, you know what, man, we should have had that recorded. It could have helped someone else. And it's not like a guru podcast. It's not a parenting podcast where you're going to find tips and tricks and all the things. I mean, there may be some.
We are definitely not parenting gurus.
We're not gurus. We're not experts. We're not professionals. I guess I'm a parenting professional because I've stayed at home with our children for a while, like most of their upbringing.
Yep.
So I'm a professional parent, actually.
Look at that. You are a professional. Wow.
Okay. All right. Well, that might be something we look into later.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for now, it's just really about having conversations about day-to-day life, things that's going on in our world, but through the lens of a parent.
Right.
Because one thing that we noticed in our life is when we became parents, things changed.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely looking through a different perspective or different lens as a parent as opposed to not a parent.
Not a parent. I mean, when there's little ears around, if there's even bigger ears, but you're kind of responsible for that development, you start seeing things differently.
Yep.
And I think the biggest place we noticed this was in
entertainment.
TV. Yeah,
entertainment.
Just sitting
TV
down,
shows,
watching
movies.
TVs. Like things we watched as...
when we were young.
As kids or teenagers. And we're like, oh, that'll be fun. Like, oh my gosh, let me show you this movie that we watched as a kid. And you start playing it and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And you look at each other with like this nervous eye contact of, I don't remember that.
Then you grab the remote and you hold it real tight because you're like, it could be ready at any moment because I don't know what's coming now.
Yeah, I remember when the Disney show Girl Meets World came out.
Yep.
And we're like, oh my gosh.
Our
it's
daughter
like this.
loved that show.
Yeah, she did. And it was a spin-off of Boy Meets World.
Boy Meets World, which we both watched when we were young.
And we were going to show it to our kids. And I remember starting it. And it was a lot about, like, child relationships. Like, teenage, middle school relationships. And we were just like, oh, wait a minute. I don't remember it being like this. This is not...
There were some innuendos in there, too, that you're like... Oh, they said that back in the 90s?
Yeah, right.
Wow.
And because we thought everything was good, clean, wholesome when we were growing up. And so we were just like, oh, we saw it differently. As kids, I don't know if it was just what we were accustomed to or it went over our heads or whatever. But I know as we were looking at that through the eyes of parenting, we were like, whoa, I don't...
Yeah. This is an actual conversation we had. Like, I don't remember it being that way.
Yeah.
Can you believe they said that? Holy cow.
Exactly, and we didn't want our children, I guess, thinking that relationship was like the goal of their teen years or their their middle school years. Like
they failed if they haven't had a relationship
if they hadn't
or something.
Had a relationship or they hadn't thought about a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever.
Especially in middle school.
In middle school, yeah, it was like you do not have to find the one for you in middle school.
Right.
Not saying that people haven't done that.
It's happened.
I have a friend who actually married her childhood sweetheart. And I mean, it does happen.
It happens.
We didn't want to set that standard for our children. And like you said, there were innuendos and we were like, oh man. And it was just like things that changed because we were parents.
I remember thinking like, I can't believe my parents let me watch that.
Yeah, we've had those conversations a lot. And
Have you guys had anything like that? Put it in the comments if you have.
Exactly. And I mean, another one, like I grew up as a teenager loving, Julia Roberts. So anything Julia Roberts was in, like, I'm going to watch that. And Pretty Woman. It was like this all-time favorite of mine. And I think it was more...
It's like the ultimate rom-com.
Yeah, it was more like the rags to riches, the fall in love, somebody sees her potential. And then I remember, like, asking you to watch it when we were married, and you're like, no. You wouldn't watch it with me. So we have a daughter, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait until, she's able to watch this with me. And looking back at it, I was like, okay, it's really not necessarily rags. That's how I see it. Rags to riches, or somebody saw someone's potential and pulled them out of a bad situation. But having a daughter, it's like, oh, she was a prostitute. Oh, I don't know. oh.
We can't even say those words.
Right. And so finally we made it to the age that we thought, okay, we're going to sit down. I'm going to sit down with my daughter. I'm going to watch this. She was 16 going on 17, and I was like, okay, we read all the reviews again, trying to remind ourselves like what's in this. And we had the remote closely held still at that. And I know when we watched it, I felt like we probably fast forwarded through half the movie, you think?
Yeah, maybe about a quarter.
A quarter of the movie. Yeah, we just it was like, oh. I mean, because you're sitting in a room, with your daughter.
Right.
And going, how is she perceiving this? Right. And I was like, I totally don't want, her to get a
just
bad
in case
message.
you're wondering, it was the sex scenes.
Yeah, it was. That's what. Yeah. It's what we fast forwarded through. And honestly, it's because like what we take in as entertainment, I feel like it is kind of a message to our children about, hey, this is the lens in which you can live life or do life. I mean, we're finding entertainment in this, so then maybe we're okaying it by that. Maybe that's why we have a different lens on it. I don't know. It's definitely something that has challenged us as parents. And so that really is what this podcast is about, is looking at life through the lens of parenting, because it changes you.
So we've been parents for 18 years now,
and
we've had a lot of conversations. We're probably going to end up going back through a lot of those conversations. So it's kind of like This Is Us. If you've seen that show, where there's going to be some present conversations, there's going to be some conversations that we had a long time ago that we're going to talk about again.
Right. I don't think we probably did as good as the parents on This Is
Us,
though.
They make you feel like a horrible parent.
Yeah, I feel like maybe we did the parts really well that they did like bad. Like, the parts that kept their kids in therapy now, like all their kids had to go to therapy.
You don't talk about
anything. I feel
anything.
like we capitalized on that really good.
Right.
It's like, oh, we did the same thing. We just kept repeating it.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. But I mean, honestly, we weren't horrible parents.
Yeah,
like,
I wasn't full of motivational quotes.
No.
No, sorry.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't think we were horrible parents.
No,
but I do think parenting sets you up for a lot of questioning. Questioning, did you get it right? Are my children going to end up horrible? Yeah. I mean, and that doesn't have to be, when they're teenagers and you're about to release them to the world. I mean, that can start as soon as they're born. Like, not that, I don't know if anybody cares, but I struggled with breastfeeding. I couldn't feed my son. Yeah. And
I did not.
Yeah, you did not. But it was one of those things where I felt like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I can't provide for my child. And so now his whole world's messed up. And I'm sure that parents have those kind of thoughts. Like, it all falls back on me. Right. And as we've said now, like, we have an adult child.
Which, that's an oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you tell me that a lot. Like, I guess, like, adult child and... Right. He's an adult.
I get what you're saying, but when I hear adult child, I think man baby.
Yeah, definitely not man baby. Like, definitely not.
Grown man in an adult diaper.
No, but sometimes I wonder, like, oh my gosh, is he prepared? Not, can he go to the potty? But, is he prepared to do real life things? And one of our favorite books from Dr. Henry Cloud, that changes.
Dude's amazing. You need to check him out.
Yes, and he has a book, The Changes That Heal, and I feel like we have read through that book several times, and it's all marked up. It's got notes. I remember I was reading it one time outside, and I left it outside, and it rained, and my book was ruined, and I was 100% not going to throw that book away because I had so many notes and so many marks that I left it out to dry, and I bound it back together with tape because I needed
True story.
My notes. And so that's the kind, I mean, I go back to it a lot. He's actually a Christian psychologist. We try to do our life based on our faith. And next to the Bible, this has been one of the books that we have held on to.
So the Bible's definitely number one.
Yes. And then when we're like, I don't know that I quite understand that in terms of parenting, we do reach out for other resources. And Henry Cloud has definitely been a good one just for boundaries and parenting. And maybe when you've gotten it wrong. And so I went back and I looked at this chapter that he has called Becoming an Adult. And I'm like, oh, yeah, like that's the one I definitely need because now I have an adult
Yeah.
child, but no, I can't say adult child. We are parents of young adults.
Young adults, yes.
All right. So we have a young adult.
Young adult.
Who is our child.
Yeah. I think.
Is that how we say that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't not think he's our child, but I think what you're saying is right.
Yeah, he's our child, but
right.
he's our adult child. And
Yeah.
that gets us back to where we...
Full circle.
Okay.
Full circle.
We are parents of a young adult.
Yes. That's it. Stop there.
And now that he has entered that transition stage of
yeah.
of adulthood. Like,
yes.
he has moved from 17.
We're getting way in the weeds right now. Welcome to the Two Parents and a Microphone podcast.
Okay. Let me reel this back in.
Reel it back in.
Okay. He's 18.
He's 18. That's right.
And I questioned myself. That's how we got here. Like, just questioning ourselves. Did we do it right?
Right.
And so I'm like, Henry Cloud has the information I need in this book, and I'm going to go read this chapter, Becoming an Adult. And so the thing that he talks about is authority and how, the child becomes an adult.
Yep.
As a child, they're under the parent's authority, and how parents handle their authority really relates until how the child becomes authoritative.
Right.
And so he's talking about, are we gentle and loving and kind? Have we been harsh? Have we been cruel? And, like, if they relate to their parent as, like, this authoritative figure that has been kind, that they may gravitate to pick up authority and live this life with great responsibility. But if their parent has maybe been short, which I have definitely been guilty of,
as well,
or cruel, or maybe misused authority, I think that's really what he's getting at. Then it could cause that child to either really reject authority or just be so passive they never take on responsibility.
Right.
And so I'm reading this going, oh my goodness, like, I'm sure that there have been gaps, right? And just wondering what do I do now?
Right,
because there might be gaps. And there was this whole idea of, like, okay, 18, adult, 18, adult. And I know that that's what society has told us, like 18 adult. But then we go, like, what does that really look like?
Right.
I mean, as far as insurance, I think it's 24, I think 25 maybe. You can, if they're, full-time student or whatever the criteria is.
To drive a rental car is 25 as well, too.
To drive a rental car is 25. I think to maybe rent some places it's 21 or 25.
Yeah, exactly.
And science says their brains aren't developed until 25. The prefrontal cortex.
It makes it weird because, like, where did you get 18 from?
Right.
Like, there's 18. Some guy somewhere going, 18, that's it. That's the time.
Okay, and that's why we're not the experts, because we did no research on this prior to having this conversation of where 18 came from.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of throwing out ideas. And
if put it in the comments where that came from.
So, again, not the experts, sharing our parenting conversations with you.
Stream of
and
consciousness.
How we do life through the lens of parents. But so here we are. We have this 18-year-old. That's what I'm going to call. He's an 18-year-old. And society,
that's where we're going to land.
Society says he's an adult.
Yes.
He has taken on this thing of, I'm an adult. Like, things change. And I remember some anxiety leading up to that of, okay, now I'm an adult, everything changes. And I remember us having the conversation with him. It's like, okay, like, when you turn from 2 to 3, or you turn 4 to 5, or 16 to 17, there wasn't like this big, it was just another day. You walked into a new season.
Yeah.
And that's kind of...
It's really one of the better ways to look at it.
Right. That's what we were talking to him about. Is like, it's not like you go to sleep at 17, you wake up at 18, and all of a sudden you've got to get a home, you're doing all your bills, and all the things are changing. I mean, he's a full-time student. He's being very responsible of, getting the degree that he wants. And it's close to home. Yeah. And we've told him, as long as you're productive and you're doing the things, like, we're trying to help you, to assist you into adulthood. It's not this clear cut, okay, I'm going to throw you out of the house now that you've turned 18. But I think sometimes
sometimes you're like, well, we need to
sometimes
give you a little push.
I mean, sometimes that could have happened at 8 years old too. You're like,
that's true.
Might be time for you to get a job and
that's
your
true.
own place to stay. But still, it's this idea that society dictates our values and our timelines.
Yeah.
And
which can change from society to society too.
That's true. Yeah, that is absolutely true. And so I just thought, like, opening up this podcast, telling our listeners, like, I don't know that...
Do we have any listeners yet?
I hope so. I mean, I'll go listen, so I'll be telling myself.
We can listen to ourselves.
Yeah. So
we do have listeners.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, we'll make our children listen, so we're going to tell them this message again.
That's right.
But just telling the listeners, like, your timeline doesn't have to be this hard, fast rule that society sets.
Sure.
Like, there are developmental timelines. I know there are things like when our child was born, there's certain things that happen. There's, kind of how they're growing and through certain stages of life, what they should be doing, how they're gaining authority or autonomy or, all these things. And those are good, but it's kind of like this loose timeline because things are different. I think we had the conversation about, even like living in like a rural area versus a populated city. Sure. You might have a child that lives on a farm and they've been driving a tractor since they're 8. Yeah. But then you have a child in New York City that probably getting a driver's license at like 15 is not a... Yeah. How do you even take a driving test in New York City? Yeah. Again, we haven't researched this. It's just one of the questions.
Definitely possible.
But I know you've driven there before, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I'd ever have my child like drive in the city, in Manhattan.
And I was like, this is awesome.
You did enjoy that. But, it is that idea of timelines and how, like, your family values and your circumstances is really what dictates that. I think there's a thematic way of doing things of, like, this is healthy.
Thematic, that's a good word.
Yep, and this is maybe unhealthy.
Yes.
Right, but not like I have to do it at this time. And so that's just like the season of life that we're in is moving into adulthood with our children. Yes. And like releasing that authority, which we've been doing. We've been preparing for this. Yep. And that was one of the things we were able to reassure our son of. It's like, hey, we've prepared for this. Like, you've been making your own decisions, and it's not a you can or you can't. Right. It's a, okay, you have a choice to make, and this is what the consequence is going to be if you make the choice. And so it's just continuing to walk that with them. And so just if you're listening... I think if you take anything away from our conversation is don't feel pressured by the world or your society to do what it says. You know what's best for your family. Right. You know what's best for your children in a lot of situations. There's a song, it's a country music song, and the singer says that, I believe most people are good. Right. And most moms qualify for sainthood. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what I'm saying is, like, parents know kind of what their children need. Yeah. Yes, sometimes you need to reach out to the expert. Yes, sometimes you need to reach out to the doctor. But you are going to have values and rules in your family that it's going to rub against society. Right. Like, we've had a lot of those, and I'm sure we're going to talk about those on our podcast.
You probably have heard some here already.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, just a lot. I mean, our friends have thought we're crazy from time to time. But that was what we valued in our home. Right. And I think overall, if we're raising our children to be good people, to not do harm to themselves or others, I think like we're on the right track. Again, like I said, our faith kind of guides us. And that's what we've allowed to be one of the main values in our family. But we've also taught them, like, to be very open to hear where other people are coming from. Sure. To kind of become all things to all people so that they can have conversations, so they can learn. Yeah. Because we've never believed that we were the be-all, end-all and we knew everything. Right. And I think that's why this podcast could be so successful is we're just having conversations.
That's what it is.
Like, conversations through the lens of parenting. And I think the one message today is don't feel stuck in the timeline that society sets for you.
Yeah, that's the one main thing.
Now, that doesn't mean that I think you said at one time, like, doesn't mean that your child is 40 years old living in your basement with no responsibility.
Right. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
But, if they're getting to that stage where they're 18, and there's going to be some transition, there's going to be some things that may be different than what society says.
Right.
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I think you're going to know what your child needs.
Right.
It's just all going to depend on if you're going to act on it or not.
Right. And also, when you don't, there's community around you. Like, you can talk to other people, their experiences. And even, like, it might not be this 18 thing. It could be you've played sports all your life, and so you felt like you're putting your kid in t-ball or soccer, and they're just not into that. And so maybe it's music, maybe it's art, maybe it's dance. So it's like all of these things that we've set. I might get in trouble for this one, but I'm going to go there. By whether it's our history or our gender roles or, whatever that we had in our mind, a lot of times we have to let who that child was created to be dictate how we parent.
Right.
And I think that's where we have to go in and we find wisdom. And it's more than just our child.
Right.
This idea of parenting is...
It's a broad spectrum these days.
It's to pull out potential. And so, I mean, that applies to grandparents. That applies to teachers. That applies to youth leaders, to...
basically anyone that has any influence on the next generation.
Yeah, employers. Like, how do I pull out the potential to see, did I put that person in a box? Did I go by some societal guideline and maybe crush the uniqueness of that child or the time that they need it, you know? I mean, like right now with our daughter, like we're looking at colleges, and she is so much struggling because it's like what the next logical step is. I go into a 4-year college and I move away, I stay on campus, and I do all the things. Well, I mean, she's a great student, but it's hard to get like a full scholarship these days. I mean, she's got a super high GPA. And so we're looking at things, and, I had told her, I was like, listen, there are more ways to do than just what the world has told you. There's a lot of ways.
Right.
And she's doing some of that creative stuff. She's probably going to finish like her associates before she graduates high school, but then she wants to go on for more. And she's just, it's like, what fits for you? Not what have you seen in the movies or, what did so-and-so do? It's like, what fits for you? And I think that's the message is what works for your family, what works for your child, what works for your organization, especially if you're leading youth. Like, what works where those young people are recognized as individuals and that most potential is like pulled out of them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And that's how we parent it. Like, again, not always getting it right.
Not at all.
And like getting it wrong a lot.
Yeah. Had to circle back a whole lot.
Whole lot of circling back. That was one of our values. When we got it wrong, we just would circle back and be like, hey, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. Let's retry. Can we replay that?
Right.
Whatever it might be. And that's where we're at now with our son, because it feels like 18 is that marker of, now I'm going to see if I got it right or not.
Yeah.
It's that marker that says, am I going to be sitting in counseling with my 40-year-old trying to undo things that I did through their childhood, right? And it can be scary. It can be really, really scary. And so one thing I've done is just given myself permission to be like, okay, I'm doing the best that I can.
Yeah.
I'm not like closing my ears to wisdom of experts or the world or whatever. I mean, reach out for help. But ultimately, this is a unique individual that I'm dealing with a unique set of circumstances.
And that's really all you can do is look and say, have I done everything I can do?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the big debate is it nature or is it nurture?
Right. Yeah.
What's the thing? But there's going to be examples on either side. There's kids that have been nurtured almost perfectly. They're going to come out not great, not make great choices.
Right, yeah.
And there are kids that have come from very unnurturing places that end up being great people and make great choices.
Right, yeah.
And you could do everything perfectly and buy the book and exactly what you think needs to happen and everything like that. They may still decide to make not great choices.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't mean it's on you.
Yeah, and reading that, going back to the Changes That Heal by Dr. Henry Cloud, like reading that, it has been, that actually rose up in my mind. What, like, if my child goes out and does not become the adult that I thought I was training up, was it my fault? Like, what did I do? What gaps did I leave?
Right.
You know, did I not nurture the thing in them well enough to become the person that I thought they needed to become?
Yeah.
Not like I'm over that, but like,
Yeah.
you know, I was trying to guide to, you know, like I said, people that do no harm to themselves don't do any harm to others, that make their world better. And, or is it just something in them? Is it this nature piece? And so, you know, really, it really comes down to, did my choices screw them up? Or do they have something to do with it? I think.
Right. There's going to be a little bit of both, I think, in that. There's a little bit of both of those ingredients in that mixture.
Yeah.
And that's a hard balance to find.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's answer that. Like, what do you feel about
you tell
nature versus nurture?
Where do you stand on the debate?
Or, I mean, what have you seen? Like, what have you, give us some examples of where you've seen, like, it was nature. It was like, I mean, I guess we call that like pure genetics, you know? Or no, there was this situation that by the genetics, it should have went completely opposite, but because of this nurturing environment, something that's different.
Yeah.
Like,
put in the comments. We want to hear what your thoughts are. We want to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, 100%.
Because we have a conversation.
We have conversations. And it's
want to join, or have you join in the conversation.
Have you join into the conversation. 100%. I think that pretty much wraps up.
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, definitely. Don't forget to, if you like the video, like it. Subscribe. You want to see more videos? Yeah. Why not?
Subscribe. Like, subscribe. Yep. I don't know all the things. I mean, some people do their videos.
I think we're going to learn. There's going to be a point somewhere.
We'll be like,
I'm going to point here. The button's going to be over there.
Yeah.
Whatever. You know where the subscribe button is, people.
And we will tell you where you can download the podcast. Everything will be linked into the
description.
Videos. Yep. And
we're going to have more conversations. We're going to record them, and hopefully you guys like them.
Yeah, 100%.
But as for now, we'll see you guys later.
2 parents
and a microphone.
That's our qualifications.
Cue the end music.
2 parents and a microphone.